Hello, my name is Hallie Persell, and I'm a senior at the University of Baltimore. I'll be talking to you about my study, which examines skin tone and its effect on perception. The purpose of this study was to examine the effect of skin tone on perceptions of emotion and personality. It's important to note that there are currently no experimental studies that manipulate skin tone to measure perception of emotion and personality. This makes it a novel subject matter. There are two systems of racial discrimination, race and skin tone, which is also known as colorism. Racial discrimination is directed towards people of color of all skin tones, while colorism is an issue related to the tone or depth of skin tone. Specifically, it's a social process that privileges light-skinned people of color over dark-skinned people of color. And while all people of color experience discrimination, an individual's skin tone can affect the intensity, rate of occurrence, and outcomes of discrimination. Colorism is not limited to the Black community. It can be found in Latinos, Asian Americans, and other ethnic groups. Colorism is actually most prevalent within racial or ethnic groups. This could be because individuals tend to perceive more physical variance in social categories that they belong to, allowing for firsthand experiences in differences in treatment, which could lead to a sense of injustice and harsh judgments. Colorism has impacted the criminal justice system as well. Having a darker skin tone makes you significantly more likely to be stopped and arrested by police and serve a longer and more severe sentence than light-skinned individuals. Having a darker skin tone also means that you are 121% more likely to be arrested than a light-skinned individual. This means that skin tone is a major predictor of probability of arrest, which significantly impacts the criminal justice system. A study that interviews African-American adolescents found that girls with lighter skin tones report having higher self-esteem and were described as friendly and outgoing, but they were also considered to be conceited or having a bad attitude. Within the same study, dark-skinned adolescents reported lower self-esteem and were described as loud, defiant, and ill-behaved. There were three hypotheses for this study. First, images of African Americans who have darker skin tones will be perceived as angrier than light skin tones. Second, images of African Americans who have darker skin tones will be perceived as more critical than lighter skin tones. And finally, images of African Americans who have lighter skin tones would be perceived as more extroverted than darker skin tones. There was a total of 173 participants ranging from 19 to 74 years old. Race and ethnicity percentages can be found in the pie chart on the left, and gender percentages can be found in the pie chart on the right. I wish I had a more diverse group of participants because the majority of the sample were white women. For example, 67.1% of race or ethnicity was represented by white or European Americans, and 65.9% of gender was represented by females. These are the images selected from the Chicago Face database. There were 8 possible conditions that participants were randomly assigned to. The original images are on the top, while the lightened images are on the bottom. The only thing altered in these images was skin tone, not background or facial expressions. This is the matrix table for the 10-item personality inventory, or the TIPI, that participants filled out when taking the study. The 7-point Likert, this is done by using a 7-point Likert scale ranging from disagree strongly to agree strongly. For this study, I was looking at the items extroverted, enthusiastic, and critical, quarrelsome. This is the matrix table for the emotional intensity scale that participants filled out when taking the survey. This is a self-created 6-item measure of the emotions anger, happiness, sadness, surprise, fear, and disgust. This was done using a 7-point Likert scale, with 1 being no emotion and 7 being extreme emotion. Anger was the variable that was being targeted on this scale. I conducted a 2x2 between subjects experimental design for anger, a critical quarrelsome personality, and an extroverted enthusiastic personality. No reliability analyses or single index scale items were computed for the study. After running the ANOVAs for all 3 variables, there was no significant differences for any of the variables. This is a chart of the effect of the emotional intensity scale. There was no significant effect for anger. Additionally, 2x2 ANOVAs were run for the rest of the emotions on an exploratory basis. There are no hypotheses on these emotions. There was a significant effect of gender on perceived disgust, meaning that perceived disgust was more likely to be seen on women than men. This can be seen from the means between female and male, with female having a higher mean. This is a chart of the effect of the 10-item personality inventory. There was no significant effects for critical or extroverted personalities. Additionally, 2x2 ANOVAs were run for the rest of the emotions on an exploratory basis. There were no hypotheses on these emotions. There was significant effects of skin tone on impressions of carelessness and uncreative personality, meaning that light skin images were more likely to be considered careless and uncreative, as it is seen when you compare the means of the light and dark skinned individuals as seen below. These extra tests were run purely out of curiosity, and they weren't relevant to the rest of the study, but they were quite interesting. The results of the analyses did not support the hypotheses. It was predicted that light-skinned individuals would be perceived as more extroverted than dark-skinned individuals. This hypothesis was not supported by the statistics. The results were not significant. It was also predicted that darker-skinned individuals would be perceived as both more critical and angrier than light-skinned individuals. Both of these hypotheses were not supported, and these results were not significant. For future research, I think it would be interesting to compare perceptions between inside an ethnic or racial group to perceptions from outside that group to test if judgments are more negative from within one's own group. There are quite a few limitations in this study. First and foremost, the large gap in participant gender, as well as a lack of a diverse participant pool. The TIPI scale was also improperly used. And finally, asking people to give their interpretation of an African-American personality based on an image might have tipped people off about the purpose of the study. Overall, I think this was really interesting, and thank you for taking the time to listen to this, and I hope you found it interesting.